The voice on the recording shouldn't have been mine. But the waveform on the screen? The pitch curve, the breath gaps, even the tiny rasp between syllables matched me perfectly. "I am Evelyn Grant," the voice said. "Calm, steady, dead. I died, but I live inside your throat now." For a second, the world went silent except for the hum of the old studio monitors. Then my pulse slammed in my ears, so loud it almost drowned her out. I tore off the headphones and the cable snapped against the desk, a quick whip of sound that made me flinch like a gunshot. "My name is Celeste Morgan, 54, forensic voice analyst at the Atlanta Police Department. For 29 years, I've dissected the sounds of confession tapes and ransom calls, studying vowels, the way surgeons study veins. But that night, the evidence table turned on me. The phone on my desk lit up, unknown number. When I answered, there was only breathing, then a whisper. "Listen carefully, Celeste. That isn't just her voice. She's speaking through your vocal cords." I froze. The fluorescent light above me buzzed, flickering the color of a morgue hallway. The air conditioner wheezed out cold air, dry as formaldehyde. Every sound felt amplified. My heartbeat, the scrape of the chair leg, the tiny pop in my throat when I tried to swallow. My hand went instinctively to the scar at the base of my neck, the one from the surgery last winter. It pulsed like something alive beneath the skin. I replayed the audio. The voice came again, layered under static, like it had traveled through water. "You swore you'd never sing again, Celeste. Why did you break your promise?" My stomach twisted. 29 years ago, I'd stood in court and pointed at that woman. Evelyn Grant, record producer, accused of coercion and blackmail. My testimony had sent her to prison. I remembered the courtroom microphone trembling in front of me, my voice shaking but clear. That voice had changed my life. It had also ended hers. Now it was back, inside my own lungs. I tried to laugh it off. "Someone's playing games," I muttered. "Voice cloning, maybe. Deep fake tech." But when I opened my mouth, the laugh that came out didn't sound like me at all. It was lower, smoother, seasoned with the same smoky tone Evelyn used to have after her 4th cigarette of the morning. I backed away from the table. My hand hit the coffee mug, sending black liquid spilling across the case file stamped Grant, Evelyn. Closed, 1996. The stain bled across the page like fresh ink. I caught my reflection in the monitor, eyes wide, lips trembling. And for the first time, I realized how foreign my own mouth looked when I spoke. It was supposed to be an ordinary evidence verification shift. Review an anonymous submission, check it for authenticity, file the report. But the recording wouldn't stop playing, looping itself even after I closed the program. "You wanted justice," the voice whispered. "Now feel what it sounds like." My throat burned, as if someone had poured ice water through it. My tongue went numb. I could still taste the metal from the headphones on my lips. I grabbed my bag, heading for the door, but halfway down the corridor, the intercom crackled. My own voice again, echoing through every speaker in the department. "Celeste Morgan falsified evidence. Celeste Morgan lied." The hallway lights flickered in rhythm with each accusation. "Who's on the system?" I shouted, but no one answered. Only that voice. Mine. And not mine, rolling out of the ceiling. By the time the sound stopped, I was shaking so hard I had to sit on the floor, palms pressed against the cold linoleum. I remember thinking, this is what guilt sounds like when it learns to mimic you. I drove home in silence, but even in the car the voice followed me. Every street sign whispered my name. When I turned off the ignition, the radio came alive on its own. Same tone. Same cadence. "You can't erase me, Celeste. You borrowed my silence. Now return it." I slammed the door and ran inside. In the mirror, I saw the faint movement of my throat, like someone else breathing underneath my skin. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in front of my old reel-to-reel machine, staring at the spools turning slowly, hypnotically. I'd used that very recorder in 1996 to analyze Evelyn's threatening calls. The ones that proved she'd manipulated young singers into silence. I'd believed the evidence without question. I'd believed my own ears. Now, hearing her voice crawl out of my own mouth, I wasn't sure of anything. Maybe someone was framing me. Maybe it was neurological post-surgery nerve misfire, auditory hallucination. Or maybe she had found a way back through the one thing we had always shared, our voices. People said 1996 was the year Atlanta found its voice. For me, it was the year I lost mine. Back then, I was 22 and naive enough to think talent was a form of morality. If you could sing beautifully, you had to be a good person. Evelyn Grant shattered that illusion before my second coffee run. She owned the Velvet Room, a recording studio hidden behind a florist shop. The air always smelled of orchids and stale tobacco, and every afternoon, sunlight cut across the mixing board like gold bars. Evelyn would sit there in her red silk blouse, nails painted the same color, her laughter sliding between octaves like a trained instrument. I was the intern who refilled the ashtrays and adjusted microphone stands, pretending not to listen when young singers came out of her office with trembling hands and smudged lipstick. At first, I worshipped her. Everyone did. She had discovered half the female voices on the local charts, built them from scratch, then broke them the same way. Once, when she caught me humming in the hallway, she stopped me with a raised finger. "That vibrato," she said, "don't let it tremble for anyone. A woman's voice is her weapon unless she lends it to the wrong man." I blushed so hard I could feel the blood in my teeth. That night she called me back to the studio and handed me a silver microphone wrapped in velvet. "It belonged to my first recording," she said. "Keep it. Every voice deserves a mirror." I thought it was a blessing. I didn't know it was a curse. A few months later, whispers started. The new singer, Lacey, didn't show up for rehearsal. Then another girl vanished from the lineup. Evelyn brushed it off. Contracts fall through all the time, but her temper started cracking. One evening, I stayed late to clean. Through the half-closed door of her office, I heard her on the phone. Her tone was no longer smoky charm, it was a blade. "If you walk away now, I'll make sure no one ever hears you again." I froze. I knew that cadence, that edge. It was the same voice later played in court. When the first girl came forward claiming blackmail and threats, the police needed a voice identification expert. I was the only one with access to the original recordings. They asked me to testify. I told myself it was justice. That by standing up against her, I was protecting every girl who had walked through that soundproof door. The day of the trial, I wore a borrowed blazer and hid trembling hands in the pockets. Evelyn sat across the courtroom, wrists cuffed but posture regal, her eyes burning through me. When the prosecutor played the tape, her voice filled the room. "You owe me your silence, darling. Sign it, or I'll sign it for you." The judge asked if I could confirm the identity of the speaker. I looked at Evelyn. Her lips curved in a faint, almost maternal smile, and said the line that sealed everything. "That's her. I'd know that voice anywhere." She didn't flinch when the verdict came. 25 years. As the guards led her away, she turned once more toward me. "Celeste," she said softly, "one day you'll learn what it costs to use your voice against its maker." That sentence chased me for decades. After the trial, everything looked like success. The police offered me a permanent position as a forensic voice analyst. Reporters called me the girl who heard the truth. My mother cried with pride on the phone. My friends said I'd saved lives. But when the applause faded, I discovered a private sentence, one Evelyn hadn't needed a judge to give me. I couldn't sing anymore. The moment I tried to hold a note, my throat burned raw. It felt like invisible fingers clawed from the inside, scraping against my vocal cords. Doctors said it was stress, psychosomatic trauma. I quit performing. I stopped even humming in the shower. The silver microphone sat at the back of my drawer, wrapped in the same velvet cloth. Some nights I'd hear a faint buzz from it, as if static wanted to crawl out. I'd open the drawer, find nothing, and close it quickly before the air turned heavy. Years went by in quiet loops, cases, reports, another promotion, another empty apartment. I learned to listen without speaking to others, to evidence, but never to myself. Whenever a victim's voice cracked on a recording, I flinched. Whenever I heard a woman plead, "Please don't make me say it," I remembered Evelyn's calm command, "Say it anyway." Some nights, I wondered if I had really been brave or simply convenient, if my testimony had given the system exactly what it wanted, a clean story with a villain and a grateful witness. I never told anyone about the dreams. In them, I was standing in front of a microphone under white light. The silver mic gleamed like a coin dropped in holy water. When I tried to speak, a different voice came out, low, sultry, edged with smoke. "Don't be afraid," she whispered. "You only borrowed me." I'd wake up gagging, hands at my throat, the taste of metal on my tongue. Looking back, I think the first real crack appeared the day I received a letter from the correctional facility, unsigned but stamped from Evelyn's wing. Inside was a single sentence, printed in typewriter ink that bled through the page. "Forgiveness vibrates at the same frequency as confession." I didn't understand it then. I burned the letter, convinced that silence would keep me safe. But silence, I learned, doesn't disappear. It waits. That's why, nearly 30 years later, when that old case file landed on my desk again, Grant, Evelyn, closed, 1996. I hesitated before opening it. The police believed someone had sent a hoax recording claiming to be her. I thought I'd hear a poor imitation, maybe some AI-generated trick. Instead, I heard myself. Same breath, same falter at the end of a sentence, same half-laugh after guilt. The voice that once condemned her was now condemning me. I reopened the drawer that night for the first time in decades. The velvet cloth was still there, but the silver microphone had changed color. Its surface shimmered faintly, as if a pulse ran beneath the metal. When I lifted it, static kissed my palm. A single note vibrated through the air. Evelyn's key, a B minor. I should have been afraid. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, the way you feel when you finally locate the sound that's been haunting you for years. Because deep down, I realized something. She had never truly left the room. She had just been waiting for the right moment, for me to listen. When I was 22, my world was a single spotlight and a cracked microphone. I sang 3 nights a week at a basement bar on the south side of Atlanta, the kind of place where beer cost less than silence, and the piano was always a half tone out of tune. Smoke curled through the air like ghosts waiting for their cue. Most nights, I sang to empty tables and the bartender's weary smile. Then Evelyn Grant walked in. She didn't belong there. Not with that ivory coat and that diamond-cut stare. The men at the bar fell quiet as if someone had lowered a fader. She moved through the haze like she owned the sound itself. When she sat at the front table, I forgot the lyrics halfway through the song. After my set, she beckoned me over with 2 fingers, slow, confident, like summoning a pet. Her perfume was tobacco and white lilies. Her voice, the warm edge of bourbon poured over ice. "You've got a wound in your voice," she said. "That's good. The audience should bleed a little when you sing." I didn't know how to answer, so I just nodded. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Celeste." "Fitting," she murmured. "Sounds like light trying to remember how to burn." That night she left a business card on the piano. Velvet Room Studios. On the back, one line in red ink. "Don't waste a throat like that on men who can't afford regret." Working for her felt like being chosen by fire. Her studio wasn't glamorous, not yet, but it pulsed with danger and promise. Every corridor smelled of solder and sweat, and she'd stalk between rooms barefoot, hair undone, cigarette glowing like a fuse. Evelyn didn't teach you to sing, she taught you to confess. If she caught me rehearsing scales, she'd stop me mid-note. "No one remembers perfect," she'd say. "They remember broken." "You want power? Crack a little." She could be cruel, slicing a phrase open until you almost cried. Then she'd smile and hand you water like a priest offering communion. In those moments, I believe she was the only person who truly heard me. One evening she called me into the recording booth after hours. The studio was empty except for the red own air, light humming like a heartbeat. She handed me her personal microphone, the silver one, engraved with her initials. "Try this," she said. "It carries ghosts better than new ones." When I sang into it, my voice came back through the monitors richer, older, almost dangerous. Evelyn's eyes gleamed through the glass. "Hear that?" she said through the intercom. That's what truth sounds like before the world edits it. I asked her what she meant. She laughed. Someday you'll understand, Celeste. A woman's truth always needs an accomplice. I just choose to be mine. She pressed a kiss against the silver mic before placing it in my hands. Your voice is strong enough to tear a man in two, she whispered. Don't ever let anyone use it but you. For years afterward, I would replay that moment. Her breath, her words, the faint tremor of admiration and threat mixed together. The velvet room grew louder, richer, more crowded. Artists came and went, some left with gold records, others left in tears. And through it all, Evelyn reigned. Equal parts mentor, predator, and savior. There were nights she'd sit me beside her in the control booth, smoke rings framing her profile, and ask me to judge others. What do you hear, Celeste? Fear, I'd say. Good, she'd reply. Fear means they're still honest. I thought she was building me, shaping me. Now I know she was tuning me. The day they arrested her, she didn't struggle. She was in that same red silk blouse, cigarette between her fingers, lipstick perfect. The detectives moved in, voices barking, papers rustling. I stood behind them, frozen. She saw me, and instead of rage, she smiled. The kind of smile that forgives and condemns in the same breath. The cuffs clicked around her wrists like applause. Don't look away, Celeste, she said as they led her past. Artists shouldn't flinch at endings. Outside, the sirens wailed. She turned her head, hair catching the light like a flame refusing to die. One day, she called back, voice steady, you'll understand. Silence is a crime too. That sentence hung in the air long after the doors closed. For weeks, I couldn't enter the studio. Her silver microphone stayed in my bag, heavy as guilt. When I finally tried to sing again, nothing came out but a rasp. It was as if her warning had settled in my throat, sealing it shut. Every note felt borrowed, every breath too loud. I'd touch the mic, expecting warmth, and find it cold as a gravestone. Still, I kept it. Because somewhere between fear and longing, a small part of me still believed what she'd once promised, that my voice could tear the world open. If I ever found the courage to use it again. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. Too many hours in the lab, too many recordings whispering in my ears. But then, the echo began, not from the speakers, from inside my skull. It started as a faint vibration under the tongue like the moment before a word is born. Then a sound bloomed, soft, sultry, precise. Evelyn's tone. Breathe deeper, Celeste. You're wasting air. I jerked upright, the pen slipping from my hand. The room was empty except for the low hum of the computer tower. Still, I could feel the vibration in my throat, as if someone else had cleared it from within. The next morning, I had to give a departmental lecture on vocal pattern forgery. Routine stuff. The conference room smelled of coffee and cold ambition. 50 officers stared up at the projection screen as I explained the difference between mimicry and morphing technology. I'd rehearsed every word, but halfway through, something shifted. The pitch of my own voice sank half an octave. The edges sharpened, grew smoky. Heads lifted. Pens stopped scratching. I heard myself say, in a register that wasn't mine, truth isn't about frequency. It's about who controls the microphone. A beat of silence followed. I froze, mouth still open, pulse hammering in my neck. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, "Is that a quote?" I forced a smile, tried to laugh it off. Just a metaphor, I said, but even that sounded wrong. Waited. Older. The room watched me with polite unease. Afterward, my colleague Devon caught up to me in the hallway. He tilted his head, concern tightening his jaw. "Celeste, you good? You sounded different in there." "Different how?" "I don't know. Like you were being dubbed." I wanted to joke, to say, maybe Evelyn's ghost is freelancing, but my throat burned too much to manage humor. When I swallowed, it felt like sandpaper scraping glass. By evening, the ache had turned into a pulse. Every time I touched my neck, the scar from the surgery seemed warmer alive. At home, the quiet was unbearable. I turned on the TV just to drown the noise in my head, but even the newscaster's voice started to warp, deepening until it sounded like her. "Good evening, Atlanta. Welcome back, Celeste." I shut it off, heart pounding, the remote slick in my palm. In the reflection of the dark screen, my lips were moving, slowly, rhythmically, though I hadn't said a word. I slacked a hand over my mouth. Nothing. Stillness. Then, faint and unmistakable, a chuckle curling up from my chest. "You borrowed me once," she whispered from somewhere behind my ribs. "I'm just collecting interest." I stumbled to the bedroom, yanked open the drawer where I kept the silver microphone. The velvet cloth shimmered faintly under the lamplight. For years it had looked dull, lifeless. Tonight it glowed, thin veins of white light pulsing along the engraving of her initials. It was humming, just loud enough to vibrate the air. I didn't touch it, but the warmth reached me anyway, like breath against skin. The room filled with a low resonance, the kind that makes your bones ache in sympathy. The same pitch I'd heard in her voice all those years ago. B minor. Her key. I whispered, "What do you want?" Silence. Then a single note, sliding up like the start of a song. I woke at 3017 a.m. to find the microphone lying on the floor beside my bed, the velvet cloth folded neatly beside it. I know I hadn't taken it out. When I picked it up, the metal was cold again. In the dim reflection on its surface, I could swear 2 mouths moved, mine and hers. That's when I realized this wasn't just memory or madness. Something had bridged the gap between our voices. The recordings, the surgery, the scar. They were just conduits. She wasn't haunting me. She was resonating. The prison smelled of rust and bleach, an odor that clung to skin no matter how long you'd been free. I hadn't been inside one in years. The corridors hummed faintly, like the world itself was waiting for confession. When I told the guard at the reception desk my name, he looked up from his clipboard and squinted. "Celeste Morgan? The voice witness from 96? I nodded, his brow furrowed. "You're a bit late, ma'am. She passed away 3 months ago." I felt something unclench and tighten at once. "Evelyn Grant? Throat cancer. Spread too fast. Couldn't even talk at the end," he said almost kindly. "But she did something strange before she went." He flipped through a thin file. The sound of paper rasping against paper felt louder than my own heartbeat. She requested to donate her larynx, her vocal cords, to medical research. Said it was for acoustic study. Not something we get every day. My throat constricted. For a second, I couldn't find my breath. "When exactly?" "March 12th, he said. "Day she died." March 12th. The exact date of my surgery. The drive to the hospital blurred into static. Streetlights smeared into white ribbons. Every sound in the car echoed twice. My voice inside my head and hers, overlapping. I called my surgeon the moment I parked. He answered on the 3rd ring, his tone too calm. "Dr. Rains? It's Celeste. I need to know about my donor." "Mrs. Morgan, calm down. Who was it? The transplant tissue you used? Who did it come from?" There was a pause. I could hear the faint hum of hospital machines through the line, the whisper of latex gloves. "That information is confidential." "Not anymore," I snapped. "You said it was anonymous." "But I think I know. I just need you to confirm." He exhaled, slow, heavy, defeated. "Celeste. The donor was a 49-year-old female, recorded as E.G. The body came from state custody. The name in the archive is Evelyn Grant." For a moment, all I heard was blood roaring through my ears. Then my stomach clenched, and I stumbled toward the nearest trash bin, retching until my throat burned raw. The irony tasted like metal. I sat on the hospital steps for a long time, the Georgia heat pressing against my skin. Every breath I took scraped against the scar on my neck, like a zipper being pulled from the inside. I touched the spot where my voice used to tremble and whispered to no one. So this is how she came back. The thought twisted through me like wire. I had testified against Evelyn, destroyed her career, sent her to rot in silence. And now her voice lived in my throat. Was that justice? Or punishment? That night, I opened every case file I'd ever worked on. murderers, scammers, victims, and laid them out across the floor of my apartment. All these years, I'd believed I was the filter of truth, the one who separated voice from lie. But how could I trust that now? What if every conviction I'd helped secure was touched by her echo? What if I had never been a witness at all, just another instrument she learned to play? The walls of the apartment seemed to hum. I pressed my palms against my ears. "Don't fight it, Celeste." Evelyn's voice purred inside me. "We share the same instrument now." I shouted, "You're dead!" The sound came back richer, darker. Her tone threaded through mine. I wanted to scream until my lungs tore, but all that came out was a strange harmony. The silver microphone on my desk began to vibrate, the faintest tremor, as if applauding. I hurled it across the room. It hit the wall, left a small dent, and rolled under the sofa. I expected silence. Instead, the apartment filled with a low resonance, like an invisible choir breathing in time with me. For 2 days, I didn't go to work. I couldn't risk opening my mouth. Every time I did, the wrong sound came out. I stopped answering calls. I unplugged my recording equipment. But the hum inside me didn't stop. It only grew louder, aligning with my heartbeat. By the third night, I realized I was afraid not of Evelyn's presence, but of what she was trying to say. So I decided to listen. I locked myself in the study, dimmed the lights, and pressed the microphone close to my lips. "Evelyn," I whispered, "what do you want?" The air thickened. My voice deepened on its own. "You stole my silence," she said through me. "I'm only taking it back." Her tone wasn't angry. It was tired. Like a singer reaching the last verse of a song she'd written too long ago. "You ruined me," I said. "You hurt those girls." Did I? The answer came inside the same breath. Or did they just stop singing when the world told them to hush? I shook my head, tears stinging. "You threatened them." I heard it. "You heard what you needed to believe," she said. "You learned early that the world only pays women who accuse louder than they confess." The words burned, because part of me knew they were meant for both of us. When dawn came, I found myself sitting on the floor, still holding the microphone. The apartment was silent, but something inside me had shifted. For 29 years, I'd carried guilt like a low note humming under every breath. I thought I'd buried Evelyn by telling the truth. Now I saw that I'd only half buried myself. Maybe this wasn't punishment. Maybe it was inheritance. Her voice inside mine was a haunting yes, but also a reminder that silence, too, is a kind of complicity. I didn't want to erase her anymore. I wanted to reclaim the instrument. The next morning, I walked to the mirror and spoke out loud, forcing the words through the burn in my throat. "My name is Celeste Morgan." The sound came rough, layered, two timbres fused together. Still, it was mine. I spoke again, louder. "You lived here too long, Evelyn. But this body doesn't belong to you. You can haunt it, but you can't own it." The reflection in the glass seemed to listen. For the first time, the echo didn't answer back. I knew then what I had to do. Not run. Not hide. Not beg for exorcism. I would use this hybrid voice, hers and mine, to expose what had been buried. The corruption, the manipulation, the truth that no one ever wanted to record. If she had given me her throat, I would give her something she never had. Atonement. For weeks, I practiced silence as if it were medicine. No phone calls, no interviews, not even casual greetings in the hallway. I told my supervisor I had a throat infection, which wasn't entirely a lie. Something inside me was inflamed, only it wasn't tissue. It was memory. Still, silence didn't cure it. It amplified it. The few times I had to speak to a cashier, to the neighbor asking about the mail, the reaction was always the same. They would blink, hesitate, then tilt their heads slightly, as if trying to locate the source of my voice. One woman at the grocery store actually stepped back. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "You sound like two people talking at once." I laughed it off, but the sound made her flinch. Even I heard it. The strange doubling, like an echo that didn't wait its turn. By the time I got home, my throat ached as though I'd been shouting, though I'd barely spoken. At night, The apartment filled with noise that wasn't there. Not loud, just persistent, melodic. A hum that began behind the breastbone and climbed up through my throat until it escaped as a faint vibration against my teeth. Sometimes it formed words. Other times it shaped itself into a song I almost recognized. Half lullaby, half liturgy, half Evelyn. Hush, little liar, don't you cry. She who swore to silence will testify. I pressed my hands over my neck to stop it, but the vibrations pulsed against my palms like a heartbeat I couldn't control. On the 7th night, I decided to confront it the only way I knew how. Through recording. I pulled the old reel-to-reel from the closet, the one Evelyn had gifted me decades ago when I was still young enough to believe in mentorships. Its wheels squeaked as I threaded a fresh tape. The silver microphone waited on the desk, still warm to the touch. I hesitated before switching on the power. The light blinked red. REC. I sat there breathing evenly, not speaking. Just waiting. At first there was only the soft static of air moving through the room. Then, faintly, under the hiss, another breath. Not mine. Do you miss me? The whisper rippled through the headphones, soft but unmistakable. I froze. My own breath had stopped, yet the waveform on the screen still moved, catching sounds that shouldn't exist. If you're real, I said carefully, say something only she would know. The reply came layered with distortion, like water over glass. You still keep the red dress I burned the hem of. My hand jerked. The reel skipped. She was right. That dress still folded at the back of my closet, smelling faintly of smoke and fear. The next morning, I played the recording again, this time through analysis software. The data looked impossible. Dual frequency bands, perfectly aligned yet offset by milliseconds, as if two separate throats had spoken in synchrony. My voice and hers. It wasn't just psychological, it was physical. The discovery should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a cold, deliberate calm settling in. If this was possession, then I would study it. If this was punishment, I would document it. I bought fresh notebooks, labeled each with dates and times, logged symptoms like a scientist. 2007 a.m. Humming intensified near scar. 4003 a.m. Double resonance when whispering vowels. 6001 a.m. Tape playback reveals additional phrase. We are not done singing. Each entry felt like a confession disguised as data. By the end of the week, I noticed something else. When I deliberately remained silent for too long, the apartment seemed to resist it. Objects shifting, air vents sighing, the faint buzz of electricity syncing with my pulse. As though the world itself needed me to speak. And when I finally whispered a single word, "Stop," the hum ceased instantly. The air fell still. But in the reflection of the window, my lips kept moving for half a second longer than they should have. I sat back in the dark, pressing the record button one last time, letting the tape spin on its own. When I played it back, my stomach turned to ice. There was a new segment, my voice speaking in a tone I didn't remember using. We are almost tuned, Celeste. The next note will wake them. I stopped the tape, heart pounding. The invitation arrived on heavy cream paper, folded with care like guilt pretending to be honor. Memorial for Evelyn Grant. Celebrating the voice that changed a generation. Below the text in smaller type it read, Keynote guest, Celeste Morgan. I should have declined. But something in me, pride, pity, maybe penance, wanted to face her ghost in daylight. The event was held in the restored Velvet Room, her old studio reborn as a museum. They'd scrubbed the walls clean, polished the mixing consoles, and hung her portrait above the stage. Evelyn's painted eyes followed me as I entered, half amusement, half accusation. The audience was a sea of familiar faces. Former singers, producers, journalists who had turned her scandal into headlines. I could feel their whispers orbit me. That's her. The one who testified. The girl who killed the Queen of Sound. The lights were warm but sharp, the kind that makes sweat look like guilt. A coordinator in a headset ushered me backstage. You'll speak right after the tribute montage, she said. 2 minutes, straight to camera. National feed. She smiled politely, not recognizing the tremor in my hand. When the montage began, Evelyn's voice filled the hall clips of her laughing in smoky studios, directing singers, giving interviews. The crowd smiled, misty-eyed. But beneath the applause track, I heard something else. An extra frequency. Faint, but undeniable. My frequency. Then came the introduction. And now, the woman who stood beside Evelyn at the beginning and who carries her legacy in every investigation she leads, please welcome Celeste Morgan. Applause rose like surf. I walked to the podium, heels echoing too loudly on the stage floor. The silver microphone gleamed under the spotlight. I gripped it, breathed in, spoke. Evelyn Grant was. The speakers exploded to life before I could finish. My voice boomed through the hall, clear and confident, but the words were not mine. I am Celeste Morgan. I lied. I destroyed Evelyn Grant. I envied her power and framed her. Gasps rippled through the audience. I froze. Every screen around the hall lit up with my face, my lips moving in perfect sync to the false confession. She never hurt anyone. It was I who manipulated the evidence. I who made her a monster. I slammed my hand on the mic. That's not me. It's not. The sound that came out wasn't my shout. It was her, Evelyn, speaking through my mouth. Liar, she purred, my throat bending to her tone. The audience erupted. Some rose to their feet, shouting. Others pulled out phones, filming. Someone screamed, "She's covering her tracks." Evelyn was innocent. A reporter in the front row shoved forward, camera light blinding my eyes. "Ms. Morgan, are you admitting to perjury?" I shook my head, backing away. "No, listen to me. It's fabricated." But every speaker in the room carried her voice, not mine, filling every corner with that smooth, damning melody. "You called it justice," she said through the feed. "Now call it what it really was, jealousy." Security rushed toward the stage. Flashes popped from cameras. My body trembled, my throat ached, as though someone inside was pulling at the strings. I wanted to rip the microphone off the podium, to silence her, but my hands wouldn't obey. They gripped tighter, knuckles white. Then, through the chaos, I saw it. On the big screen above me, the live feed showed me, but not quite. The woman staring back had my face, yet her smile was Evelyn's, sharp, slow, knowing. For a heartbeat, I thought I was seeing a ghost. Then I realized. The broadcast had been altered. Someone had layered her image over mine, just like the voice. Deepfake. Voice morphing. The tools I'd spent my career exposing were now turned against me. "Shut it down," the producer yelled. Technicians scrambled over the soundboard. But the sound didn't come from their system anymore. It came from every device in the room. Phones, cameras, speakers. "Celeste Morgan silenced me once," Evelyn's voice said. "Now let her be silent in truth." The lights flickered. Feedback screamed. And then silence. Real, raw silence. I stood there, breathless, surrounded by stares sharp enough to cut. I turned to the camera. Still live, still rolling. My hands shook, but I steadied the microphone, raised my chin, and spoke. This time the words were mine, rough-edged and burning. "Is she still in me?" I said. "Then listen, Evelyn. I am not the frightened girl who let you decide what my voice was worth." The room stilled. "You said silence was a crime." "Fine. Then hear this. This is the sound of me refusing to be your prison." For a moment, even the hum of the amplifiers disappeared. Then came the storm, reporters yelling, security pulling me backstage. The crowd splintering into argument, half shouting my guilt, half demanding proof. A young woman, maybe 30, ran up to me before they dragged me off stage. Her eyes were wide, wet. "I was one of her girls," she whispered. "Evelyn did what they said. Don't let them rewrite it." Her voice trembled, but it steadied something inside me. I nodded. "I won't." Backstage was chaos, screens flashing, techs shouting into headsets, the event director pale with panic. "Someone hijacked the feed," a man barked. It wasn't from our server. It came remotely. He turned to me. Do you have any idea who would? But before he could finish, a monitor crackled back to life. A live video feed. From my home office. The silver microphone sat on my desk, bathed in soft blue light. Its power indicator flickered like a pulse. A voice. Our voice spoke from the speakers. Round 2, Celeste. You still think you own the truth? Everyone stared. I felt the blood drain from my face. I ran. Out the side door into the night air thick with humidity and shame. Camera flashes followed me down the alley. The city pulsed around me. Billboards flickering, traffic humming like low static. Every sound carried a hint of her timbre, that smoky undertone that once made me believe I could be something more. Now it was poison. By the time I reached my car, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I slammed the door, turned off my phone, sat there in the dark. The silence pressed against my eardrums until I could hear my own pulse again. Then, faintly from nowhere and everywhere, the hum returned. We're not enemies, Celeste, she said inside me. Then stop, I whispered. Stop destroying what's left of me. I'm not destroying, she murmured. I'm conducting. Her laugh was low, melodic. And you? You're finally singing on key, I screamed. An animal sound that shredded the air. Car alarms blared. Dogs barked. But underneath my raw cry, another voice sang in harmony. Evelyn's. It wasn't echo anymore. It was duet. Later, I watched the replay on the news. My face, twisted and defiant. My voice overlapping hers. Commentators argued whether it was guilt, mental breakdown, or performance art. They didn't understand. It wasn't any of those. It was a war for the same instrument. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, eyes swollen from crying. I forced myself to whisper one last thing to the reflection. You want to live through me, Evelyn? Then listen closely. I leaned forward, nose almost touching glass. You're not my curse, you're my witness. The reflection smiled. Not quite mine, not quite hers. And somewhere deep inside, a final whisper answered. Then sing, Celeste, but don't forget who taught you the melody. By morning, the world had already chosen a verdict. Celeste Morgan trended #1. Voice Thief followed close behind. Screenshots of the memorial speech flooded every platform. Thousands of comments dissected my face frame by frame. The trembling lip, the widened pupils, the half-smile that wasn't mine. They called me the woman who killed her twice. Once with testimony. Once by stealing her voice. The department suspended me, pending investigation. They used phrases like public confidence and conflict of interest, but what they really meant was contamination. When I tried to walk into the building to collect my things, the receptionist wouldn't meet my eyes. A security guard escorted me out. I heard someone whisper as I passed, "She doesn't even sound human anymore." For the first time in decades, my apartment felt foreign, too quiet, too clean, like someone had staged it for evidence. The silver microphone sat on the desk, unplugged yet faintly glowing from within. I covered it with a towel. The glow seeped through the fabric anyway. My inbox filled with messages, half hate, half fascination. You monster. Is it true you cloned her voice? Can you make her sing again? What's it like to talk with the dead? I didn't answer any of them. But late that night, an email arrived from an untraceable address. Subject: Play me. Attached: a video file, 22 seconds long. I almost deleted it. But curiosity, the same instinct that had made me a forensic analyst, won. When I pressed play, the screen showed nothing but static. Then a familiar sound, my own breath, measured and calm, followed by my voice. Steady, deliberate. April 5th, 1997. She visited me again today. Through the wall. Through the wire. She says the truth can be recorded backward. The words chilled me. I had never said them. The timestamp was real. The background noise, the hum of my old apartment fridge, was unmistakable. Yet in 1997, I hadn't owned any recording equipment outside the lab. The file ended abruptly. I sat there, staring at the frozen frame of static. Then, the next email came. Subject. Second verse. This one was longer. 1 minute and 12 seconds. Same voice. My tone, my rhythm, reading what sounded like Evelyn's diary. The girl doesn't understand what she took. Voices aren't born, they're transferred. I built her throat like an instrument, and she tuned it against me. The image flickered. Evelyn's handwriting appeared across the screen, matching the audio word for word. I paused, rewound, played again. The signature at the bottom, E.G., was flawless. Someone had access to her private journals. Someone wanted me to hear them through my own voice. Within a week, the clips multiplied. One arrived every night, always from a new address. Each one darker, more personal. I forgave her the day she lied. My voice confessed in one. But she'll never forgive herself for the sound of applause. The hacker, or whoever they were, knew too much. They knew the dates of my surgeries, the equipment I used, the brand of cigarettes Evelyn preferred. They also knew the one thing I had never told anyone. The night before testifying, I'd almost backed out. I'd gone to her holding cell, stood outside the glass, and whispered through the intercom. "If you admit what you did, I'll save you." She'd smiled and said, "You already have." No record existed of that conversation. Not even in court transcripts. Yet one of the anonymous clips recreated it perfectly, line for line. I contacted Devin, the only colleague who still took my calls. He met me at a diner on the edge of town, eyes darting like a man meeting a fugitive. "Celeste, these clips. Maybe it's just deep fake stuff," he said, pushing his coffee away. "Then why use my voice to confess to things I never said?" "Because you're the perfect ghost story," he replied quietly. "The woman who framed her mentor, got her throat replaced with the mentor's, and now can't tell who's speaking. It's viral gold." His words stung because they were true. I leaned closer. "Devin, whoever's doing this has Evelyn's private tapes. I need help tracing the metadata." He hesitated, then sighed. "I'll see what I can do. But be careful. Once something's online, it starts living on its own." By the time I got home, there were 3 new videos waiting. I didn't play them. Instead, I went to the mirror. My reflection looked normal. Older, thinner, but the expression wasn't mine. The mouth seemed amused, patient, like it knew what came next. "You're enjoying this," I whispered. The reflection's lips moved half a second later. "You always enjoyed my attention." I staggered back, slamming into the desk. The towel fell off the microphone. The glow pulsed brighter. Thump. The apartment's speakers popped on, though they weren't even connected. Then my voice. Calm, recorded, undeniable. I wasn't the only one who lied in court. The next day, Devin called in a panic. "Celeste, you need to see this. Someone just uploaded a full documentary cut. The Grant tapes. The Confession of Celeste Morgan. It's everywhere." He sent me the link. A slickly edited 30-minute film. Grainy footage of me on stage, overlaid with audio confessions, spliced from the hacker's clips. The narration, again in my own voice. "The world believed me. That's my sin." The documentary ended with a chilling close-up of Evelyn's portrait dissolving into my face. The Grant tapes hit 1 million views in 4 hours. By the second day, strangers stood outside my building holding signs. "Murder. In stereo, give her voice back." Police cruisers parked nearby, more to protect the protesters from me than the other way around. Inside, the lights flickered whenever I tried to sleep. The hum from the microphone became constant, like a power source feeding something unseen. I unplugged it. It kept glowing. At 3 a.m., a message appeared on my laptop screen. No sender ID, no app open. "Hello, C.E. Celeste. I can help you, but you won't like the price." I typed back, fingers trembling. "Who are you?" The reply came instantly. "Someone who knows what you really said in court." Then another file dropped into the folder. Truth. Wave against every instinct, I hit play. It began with the original trial audio. Evelyn's recorded threats to her singers. But midway through, the waveform fractured, replaced by a deeper tone. My voice layered beneath hers, whispering, "Say it, Evelyn. Say what I taught you." The courtroom murmurs faded into silence. If the clip were authentic, it meant I'd been the manipulator, not the witness. But it wasn't true. It couldn't be true. Still, when I played it again, the sync between our voices was perfect. I didn't sleep that night. I scoured through archives, cross-checking metadata, hunting for digital fingerprints. But whoever forged the files knew my habits. They'd used the same audio tools, the same calibration levels I preferred. They were building a case against me with my own techniques. Somewhere in the noise, I began to notice patterns. Timestamps aligning with my dream logs, phrases lifted directly from my notebook entries. Whoever this hacker was, they weren't just copying Evelyn. They were inside me. I started recording every hour of my day to prove my innocence, to capture a stretch of silence untouched by interference. But each morning when I played the tapes back, there was always something extra. Humming, whispering, sometimes full sentences. Tell them the truth, Celeste. You lied once. You'll lie again. We only want our voice back. The plural terrified me. We. By the end of the week, I had become a recluse. Curtains drawn, walls lined with acoustic foam to keep the sound from leaking. Still, the world outside grew louder. Podcasts, conspiracy forums, self-proclaimed audio experts, analyzing my tone like scripture. They debated whether I was possessed, deranged, or conducting a social experiment. A few called me a prophet. The absurdity would have been funny if it hadn't also been my life. On the 10th night, the final message came. Subject: last broadcast. Attached: a live feed. When I opened it, I saw the Velvet Room, the same stage from the memorial. Empty, except for the silver microphone at center stage. And then a new message flashed across my screen. Kemi back. One more performance. Then we'll stop. The feed cut to black. For a moment, I sat frozen, hand hovering over the keyboard. Part of me knew it was bait. But another part, older, wounded, curious, wanted to know what they would do if I actually showed up. The IP address traced to a building I knew too well. The Velvet Room, Evelyn's original studio, shuttered after the trial. I hadn't set foot there in 29 years. The parking lot was overgrown, the sign half peeled away, only the word ELV left hanging like a broken note. The front door was chained, but someone had cut the padlock recently. Inside, dust hung in the air like snow. Every step echoed with a faint reverb, as if the walls still remembered the sessions that once shook them. The smell hit me first. Old coffee, metal, mildew, and something faintly chemical. I followed the hum of electricity down the corridor. At the end was a door I didn't recognize before. Heavy, soundproof, unmarked. A faint red light blinked above it. When I pushed it open, I realized the studio hadn't been abandoned at all. Banks of hard drives lined the walls, their indicator lights blinking like an audience holding breath. In the center, a single workstation glowed alive. Hundreds, no, thousands of files scrolled across the screen. Voice Library 01 XXX. I clicked one at random. A woman's voice, mid-40s, quivering. My name is Lacey Porter. Evelyn says my tone is too soft. She says she'll fix it. The next file, Diane Carter, Session 3, trying again. And another, younger, breaking. Evelyn told me to scream until it turns into melody. My throat tightened. Each file was a confession, a fragment, a trapped echo of someone she'd molded. But buried near the bottom of the directory, one name stopped me cold. C.E. Lesty, 001.wave. The timestamp read, March 12, 2025. The day of my surgery. My fingers shook as I double-clicked. The speakers crackled, and Evelyn's voice filled the room. Low, intimate, almost tender. If you're hearing this, Celeste, it means the second half of our duet has begun. I froze. They'll tell you I died, but you know better. Voices don't die. They transfer. You carried me once in testimony. Now you carry me in tone. Don't fight it. We're composing the same song. The sound warped, glitching into laughter that wasn't quite human. If you're frightened, remember what I told you. Silence is the only sin I never forgave. The clip ended with a single sustained note. A B minor hum vibrating through the walls. I covered my ears, but the sound didn't stop. It was inside me, vibrating against my ribs. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice came from behind me. I spun around. A woman stood at the door, thin, pale, hair streaked with silver. Her eyes reflected the blue glow of the monitors. "Who are you?" I demanded. She smiled faintly. "You wouldn't remember me. I was Evelyn's assistant. Back then, I handled the archival side of her experiments." I stared at her. "Experiments?" She stepped forward, tracing a finger along the dusty console. She called it voice rebirth. The idea was to prove that memory could exist in vibration, not just tissue. Every sound we make leaves a signature in the body, tiny resonances in the bones, the cords, even the cells. Her voice grew steadier, almost reverent. When Evelyn was diagnosed, she started mapping her own resonance. Neural frequency, harmonic DNA. She wanted to see if a voice could survive death, not as a ghost, but as data. When she found a match, she donated her throat. The words hit like a fist. "You mean?" "Yes," she said softly. "To you." I stumbled back, shaking my head. "That's impossible." She shrugged. "Impossible is just untested. She said you were the only one whose frequency aligned perfectly with hers. Your testimony proved it. Two voices vibrating on the same moral pitch." I laughed, raw, bitter. "Moral pitch? She destroy people." The woman looked at me sadly. Or maybe she freed them, depending on which voice you believe. I turned toward the screens again. The files kept multiplying, new ones appearing on their own. Names I didn't know. Then, one that froze me. CE-LASTEW02.wave. The timestamp was 5 minutes ago. I opened it. My own voice filled the speakers, breathless, terrified. "I'm here. I found the lab. Someone's watching me." I gasped. "What kind of sick joke is this?" The assistant didn't answer. She was watching me closely, almost studying my movements. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "She's not haunting you. You're finishing her research. Your speech patterns, your reactions, they're generating new data every time you speak." I backed away. "You mean I'm recording her?" "No." Her smile was small, chilling. "You're recording you both. Evelyn always said a perfect duet doesn't need two singers. It just needs one who remembers." The hum deepened. The drives began spinning faster, lights blinking in sync with my heartbeat. "Make it stop," I whispered. The assistant's face softened. "You can't." She wrote a final protocol, an auto-extraction system. "The moment you entered the building, it started syncing to your voice print. That's why she lured you here." My knees went weak. She knew I'd come. Of course, she knew curiosity better than anyone. The room flickered, the monitors flashing lines of code that looked like poetry. Frequency. Memory. Memory, survival. Survival, survival. Harmony. Each phrase pulsed in rhythm with the B minor tone. "You said you worked for her," I hissed. "Then why tell me now?" She hesitated. "Because the project was meant for preservation, not manipulation." "But the others? The ones funding her? They want control. They've been leaking those fake confessions online. They're not trying to haunt you, Celeste. They're trying to sell you." The words hung heavy between us. "Sell me? Your voice, your guilt, your duality? It's perfect for synthetic vocal AIs. Evelyn's final data is worth millions. You're their prototype." Something inside me snapped. I lunged toward the console and yanked the power cords from the wall. Sparks flew. The screens went black. The hum stopped only for a moment, then surged back, louder, rawer. The drives rebooted themselves. Evelyn's voice spilled from every speaker. "You can't destroy what's already recorded, darling." The assistant grabbed my arm. "You have to leave now. Once it finishes syncing, she'll be everywhere networked, autonomous. This was never about haunting you. It was about distribution." I pulled free, heart pounding. Then help me stop it. She shook her head. I can't. But maybe you can rewrite it. The system responds only to your frequency. If you speak now, command it. It might listen. I stepped to the mic, throat burning, breath shallow. Evelyn, I whispered, if you're still in here, end this. Please. For a moment, nothing. Then a soft laugh. End it? Oh, Celeste. This is the beginning. The hum spiked, filling every corner of the studio. I slammed my hands over my ears. The assistant shouted something, but her voice dissolved into static. And then, silence. All the lights went out. When I opened my eyes, the monitors were dark, the drive still. The assistant was gone. Only the faint reflection of the silver microphone glimmered in the emergency light, lying on the floor. I picked it up, trembling. The engraving beneath the dust had changed. New letters etched across the metal. Shared. Once. Saved twice. I didn't know whether to scream or to pray. For days after the discovery in the basement, I didn't leave the apartment. I barricaded myself with hard drives, cables, and half-drunk coffee cups, as if data could become a fortress. If Evelyn had turned me into an instrument, I would turn the evidence into my weapon. I started with the clips, the fake confessions that had spread like infection. Each file carried my tone, my breath, even the micro-tremor unique to my left vocal cord. But patterns never lie, and patterns are what I've spent my life reading. When I slowed the waveform, I saw it. Microscopic inconsistencies, missing harmonics, spectral gaps where emotion should be. A digital ghost breathing through the cracks. No human voice moves with that precision. No guilt trembles at exactly 44. 1 kilohertz. It was synthetic. Someone, or something, had merged Evelyn's frequency map with mine using a generative voice, AI, to craft every line. An algorithm wearing my shame like skin. I mapped the frequencies side by side. My voice, a living waveform, jagged, erratic, beautifully flawed. Evelyn's, smooth, mathematical, precise. When overlaid, they produced interference beats that oscillated at exactly the same tempo as my resting heartbeat. It was poetic, if horrifying, the living and the dead caught in perfect rhythm. Still, I had proof now. I exported the visuals, color-coded the differences, annotated timestamps. Then, I went further. I reprocessed the raw 1996 recordings from court, Evelyn's threats to her singers, the analog tape hiss, the cigarette crackle, the moment her temper slipped and her mask fell. Every second of that audio screamed authenticity. No machine could replicate that kind of cruelty. I was going to play them side by side, for the world, and for her. I sent invitations to every journalist who had dragged my name through headlines. Subject, the truth. Will play itself. Location, the reconstructed Velvet Room. Date, 1 week later. Some came out of curiosity, others out of guilt, who just wanted the ratings. But they all came. On the morning of the presentation, I walked into the studio carrying nothing but my laptop and the silver microphone. The engraving still read, shared once. Saved twice. I'd decided not to question it anymore. A crew set up lights and cameras. Devin stood by the mixing board, pale but loyal. You sure about this? He asked. If I stay silent, she wins twice, I said. He nodded. Then let's give her one hell of an encore. The room filled quickly, reporters, technicians, former colleagues. The air buzzed with the kind of anticipation only scandal can buy. When I stepped to the podium, I didn't use the microphone. My voice had always been strong enough. 3 months ago, I began. Someone used my voice to confess to crimes I didn't commit. Today, I'm going to let you hear the difference between truth and simulation. I motioned to Devin. The first clip began. The viral confession, projected through the surround speakers. I am Celeste Morgan. I lied. I destroyed Evelyn Grant. The audience murmured, the same words that had ruined me. I raised my hand. Now, let's listen to what digital guilt sounds like when you strip away the illusion. I clicked on the screen. Spectrograms bloomed, bright reds and blues shifting in real time. Notice these gaps, I said, pointing. Real emotion creates random frequency chaos. Tiny tremors, involuntary distortions. This version is too clean. Too obedient. The clip warped mid-playback. The pitch glitched. An unmistakable mechanical pulse surfaced beneath the words. Evelyn's frequency, cycling like a metronome. Gasps rippled through the room. That's not me, I said quietly. That's the algorithm singing guilt in stereo. Then I switched files. The 1996 courtroom recording filled the studio. Evelyn's voice, raw, imperious, venom in every syllable. If you leave me, I'll make sure no one ever hears you again. Even through old analog static, her arrogance was alive. A sound that couldn't be synthesized, too human, too cruel. This, I said, is what authenticity sounds like. Breath, crackle, imperfection, not code. Not resurrection, just a woman who believed she owned every voice she touched. I let the tape roll until the final line, the one she'd whispered before her arrest. Silence is treason. Then I hit stop. The room stayed still. Cameras whirred softly. A few reporters shifted in their seats, uneasy. I could feel her, Evelyn hovering in the quiet, furious that I dared to reclaim the sound. So I turned toward the silver mic, lifted it, and said, "You're listening, aren't you?" No response. Just the faint hum of electricity. "You wanted a duet," I said. "Here it is." I pressed play on one final file, CE Lest 01. Wave. Her recorded voice rose again, soft, seductive. "If you're hearing this, it means I've completed the song." Halfway through, I spoke over it, my voice steady, cutting through hers like sunlight through smoke. "No, Evelyn. You didn't complete anything. You just left it unfinished long enough for me to write the ending." The overlapping voices filled the room. Hers. Mine. Colliding until the frequencies canceled each other out. The monitors flickered, the speakers cracked, and for the briefest second, there was pure silence. Real silence. Earned silence. When the lights steadied again, I turned back to the audience. "She wasn't reborn in me," I said, my throat raw but steady. "I'm just the one who sang the last note of her unfinished song." The silver microphone glowed softly in my hand, no longer ominous, just warm. Reporters began clapping. Others wiped their eyes. Even Devin looked stunned. But the applause wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that, for the first time in 30 years, the sound inside me was my own. Later, after the crowd dispersed, I stayed behind. The studio was quiet again, stripped of voices and judgment. I placed the microphone on the stand and whispered, "We're done, Evelyn." From the speakers came one faint response, almost kind, almost gone. "Good, then sing, Celeste, just don't stop." I smiled through the tears. Maybe she had earned that final line. The morning of the press conference, Atlanta wore its favorite disguise, sunlight sharp enough to look honest. News vans lined the block, cables snaking into the doors of the repurposed velvet room. Inside, technicians calibrated cameras, reporters rehearsed their accusatory questions, and every wall hummed with tension. I hadn't slept in 30 hours. The silver microphone rested in my hands, polished, heavy as a confession. On the drive over, I'd practiced what to say. Not a speech. No, speeches are for people who still believe words can be controlled. This was going to be a trial of sound. The world had decided I was guilty. Now I was going to let it listen to the verdict instead. Devin met me by the control booth, jaw tight, eyes red from sleepless nights. "You really think they'll believe the data?" he asked. "They don't have to," I said. "They just have to hear it." He nodded, exhaled hard, and squeezed my shoulder before heading toward the mixing console. The hall was packed. Journalists, bloggers, law enforcement officials, even a few of Evelyn's former protégés sitting like ghosts in designer suits. Once Ed, inside Ed, once rained. On me. I walked onto the stage. For a second, the light blinded me. The crowd was a dark ocean behind it. The hum of equipment pulsed through the floorboards like the heartbeat of the city itself. The moderator's voice echoed through the speakers. Please welcome Celeste Morgan, former forensic voice analyst for the Atlanta Police Department. Applause, brittle and reluctant. Then, silence. I stepped to the podium and set down the silver microphone. Its surface caught the light like liquid. I could see my reflection in it, two faces overlapping for an instant, mine and hers. You've all heard my voice before, I began. You've also heard a version of it that wasn't mine. Today, I'm going to let you decide which one deserves to live. Murmurs rippled through the audience. I gestured toward the screens flanking the stage. Devin gave me a subtle nod and hit play. The first file filled the hall. The now infamous confession clip. I am Celeste Morgan. I lied. I destroyed Evelyn Grant. The sound rolled through the speakers, rich and steady, almost believable. The audience stiffened, reliving the scandal that had fed them for months. Then I raised my hand, and the playback froze mid-sentence. Listen to what happens when we let a machine impersonate remorse, I said. The display changed to a real-time spectrogram, the voice unfolding in ribbons of color. I zoomed in. This, I pointed to the screen, is an algorithm's idea of guilt. Perfect symmetry. No heartbeat. No breath. I hit another button. A second waveform appeared, jagged and alive. And this, I said, is a human lie. Messy. Uneven. Full of fear. Do you see the difference? The room leaned forward, collectively holding its breath. AI doesn't understand emotion. It imitates it. It borrows truth without carrying the weight. Just like Evelyn once did with her singers. I switched to the second file, the courtroom recording from 1996. Her voice filled the speakers. If you walk away now, I'll make sure no one ever hears you again. Even through static, it carried a chill that machines could never counterfeit. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. That, I said quietly, is Evelyn Grant, unedited, unfiltered, undeniable. I looked straight into the nearest camera. For 29 years, I lived with her echo in my throat. The world thought it was guilt. It was proof. Devin brought up the final window, an AI forensic analysis interface we'd built overnight. It compared the spectral fingerprints of both recordings in real time. Within seconds, the system displayed its result in bold red letters across the monitors. MATCH. Failure. Synthetic. Overlay detected. A low murmur spread through the hall. The journalist stared at the screen, then back at me. That means, I said, voice steady, the viral confessions were fabricated using generative synthesis, a composite of my voice and Evelyn's frequency map. She didn't return from the dead. Someone just made her sing again. The words landed like thunder. One reporter stood. Who made them? Ms. Dove. Morgan? Are you saying Evelyn Grant's research was stolen? I met his gaze. I'm saying we stole it from every woman who ever spoke and wasn't believed. Evelyn turned pain into data. Someone turned that data into currency. The audience erupted. Questions, shouts, flashes. I lifted a hand. The silver microphone glinted. But this story isn't about who forged the sound. It's about who let it spread. Who profits from a woman's broken voice, living or dead. I paused, letting the silence stretch taut. Once, justice used my voice to punish someone else. Today, I'm using a dead woman's to free the truth. I pressed the final button. The speakers came alive with a fusion of two frequencies. Evelyn's and mine layered, resonating, colliding, until they merged into something unrecognizable. The system analyzed it, searching for identity. The result flashed. No unique we-match found. A perfect equilibrium. The machine couldn't tell us apart. Gasps rippled across the room. Reporters turned to one another, unsure what they were hearing. I leaned into the microphone, my voice raw but resolute. That's what power sounds like when it stops belonging to one name. For a moment, no one moved. Then the first clap came from the back row, hesitant but real. Then another. Then dozens. The hall filled with applause so loud I could feel it in my bones. But beneath the thunder, something else stirred. A faint hum from the speaker array, the same B minor resonance I'd heard since the surgery. I froze. The microphones on the podium flickered. Across every screen, Evelyn's portrait appeared, slowly fading into static. Then, through the feedback, her voice faint, disembodied but unmistakably hers. Beautiful, isn't it? The sound of truth finally tuning itself. Gasps swept the room again. Technicians scrambled, checking cables, muttering about residual data playback. But I didn't move. I let her finish. "We were always the same song, Celeste," she said softly. "You just found the right key." The monitors glitched once, then went dark. I exhaled, the air trembling in my throat. The hum faded, leaving only the real sound of applause. It felt like the first time in my life that silence belonged to me. I raised the microphone one last time and looked directly into the broadcast lens, the one transmitting live to millions watching at home. "You wanted a confession? Here it is." I let the pause hang until it became heavy. Justice once borrowed my voice to punish the living. Today, I borrowed a dead woman's to give truth back its pitch. The hall went still again, no breathing, no rustling. Even the camera seemed to listen. Then the applause returned. Thunderous, relentless, human. I lowered the microphone slowly. My throat throbbed with pain, but it was the kind that comes after a song, not a wound. When it was over, reporters swarmed, flashes cutting through the air like lightning. I answered none of their questions. Devin caught my eye from the booth, gave a small nod. The signal that everything had recorded cleanly. The data, the proof, the vindication. I walked off stage through the side corridor, into the dark where the sound couldn't follow. Outside, the crowd had gathered, some cheering, some weeping, some still suspicious but quieter now. I looked up at the skyline. The sun was setting, light spilling across the glass towers like a final broadcast. For years, I'd lived afraid of hearing Evelyn again. Now, I realized she'd never been my enemy. She'd just been the amplifier that forced me to find my own volume. Inside the studio, someone replayed the final quote for the broadcast recap. My voice echoed from the open doors. Justice once borrowed my voice to punish the living. Today, I borrowed a dead woman's to give truth back its pitch. It sounded strange hearing it out loud, half sermon, half closure. But it was mine, every syllable. Later, when everyone had gone, I returned to the stage. The silver microphone still stood there, catching the low amber light. I touched it gently, tracing the engraving. The metal was warm. For a fleeting moment I thought I heard her hum again, soft, distant, like a heartbeat fading at last. "We're done, Evelyn," I whispered. "You can rest now." No answer. Only the faint feedback of a room remembering sound. I smiled through the ache in my throat. The broadcast would run worldwide. They'd call it redemption, or revenge, or madness. Let them. Because for the first time in 30 years, I didn't need the world to listen. I just needed to stop echoing. The night after the broadcast, I drove home with the windows down. The city felt different. Less like an accusation, more like an echo finally fading. Every billboard still flickered with my face, but the headlines no longer screamed. They simply listened. Inside my apartment, the silence was whole again. Not the tense, waiting silence of guilt, but a clean kind, the kind that hums softly when something broken has just healed. I turned on no lights. The moon pooled over the desk where the silver microphone waited, loyal and unblinking. I sat before it for a long time, just breathing. Each inhale rasped through my throat, a reminder of all it had survived. The surgery, the lies, the duet that nearly undid me. When I touched the metal, it was warm, almost human. "You've done enough," I whispered. I found an old engraving tool in my drawer, the same one I'd once used to label evidence drives. The blade caught the moonlight as I pressed it to the surface of the mic. Tiny sparks flicked off, like stars trying to find their way home. Letter by letter, I carved the new inscription. Shared once. Freed twice. The words shimmered when I blew the dust away. A promise and a release. I'd borrowed her voice once to survive the trial of my own making. Now I was setting it free. Hers, mine, all of it. In the morning, I called the dean of the Howard School of Audio Arts, a small institute I used to visit years ago. One that trained young black women in sound engineering, a field where women's voices were still filtered through men's approval. I told her I wanted to make a donation. Not money, but memory. When I arrived that afternoon, the students were in session, testing microphones, learning to master noise levels, laughing at feedback squeals. Their voices, young, unbroken, unapologetic, filled the hall with something I hadn't heard in decades: possibility. The dean, Dr. Harper, met me in the corridor, surprised but kind. "Ms. Morgan, it's an honor," she said. "We've all followed your story." I handed her the box. Inside, nestled in velvet, the silver microphone gleamed. "It's seen too much," I said, "but it still works. Maybe it should belong to someone who isn't afraid of her own sound." She opened the lid and read the engraving aloud. "Shared once. Freed twice." Her eyes softened. "Beautiful." She led me into the main recording room where the students gathered around. One girl, barely 20, asked if she could hold it. Her hands were careful but not reverent. She wasn't afraid of the past it carried. "It's heavier than it looks," she said, smiling. "Voices usually are," I replied. They connected the mic to the console. The red indicator light blinked alive, steady and calm. The room went quiet as the girl stepped up and spoke into it. "Testing. 1, 2. Her voice filled the speakers, bright, confident, alive. No static. No ghost. No Evelyn. Just sound, pure and unclaimed. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the resonance. Afterward, the students asked for photos. They wanted to hear about forensic acoustics, not scandal. I told them about frequencies, about how every human voice leaves a fingerprint no machine can fake. And I told them something Evelyn had once said, but rephrased for myself. A woman's voice isn't her weapon. It's her compass. Don't let anyone else steer it. They wrote it down like gospel, though I meant it simply as survival advice. When I left the school, the sun had already lowered behind the skyline. The windows of the recording room glowed faintly gold. Inside, the students were laughing, replaying their takes. Each sound wave rippling through that space felt like a small resurrection. Back home, my apartment was lighter somehow. I made tea, opened the windows, and for the first time in decades, I sang. Not words, just sound. It was fragile, off-key, and mine. The air didn't fight me this time. The echo didn't answer back. Later, I sat down to write my final case note, not for the police, not for the media, but for myself. Subject: Evelyn Grant. Closed. Addendum: voice reclassified. Not evidence. Legacy: I signed my name beneath it, slowly, deliberately. My hand didn't shake. When I looked up, I caught my reflection in the window. Older, thinner, but finally singular. No overlay, no ghost, just one mouth, one breath. I know people will keep arguing about what really happened. Whether I exonerated her or exorcised her, whether technology can ever be trusted with human truth. Let them. The point was never to convince anyone else. It was to reclaim the one sound that had always belonged to me. Silence. And beneath it, the faint hum of life continuing. Traffic outside, a child's laughter down the block, a dog barking in rhythm. All those small, imperfect noises that remind the world it's still alive. Before I went to bed, I checked my messages. Among the chaos of interview requests and congratulations, one anonymous email stood out. No subject, no signature. Just a single line of text. "You finally found harmony." For once, I didn't feel fear. I simply smiled, whispered into the quiet, "Yes." And this time, it's mine. A year later, my voice no longer hurt when I spoke. The scar on my throat had faded to a thin line, pale against my skin, like the closing of a parenthesis. Every morning, I touch it the way people test a healed bone. Not to check for pain, but to remember it used to exist. The world had moved on from the Grant affair. The tabloids found new voices to ruin, new women to mistrust. But I stayed where I was, learning what it meant to speak without fear. That was when the idea for True Resonance Atelier came to me. Born not from guilt, but from gratitude. I wanted to give other women what no one had given me, the permission to sound like themselves again. The studio stood in a quiet neighborhood south of the city, once a failing gospel hall. We stripped the paint, rewired the acoustics, softened the light. The first time I stepped inside after the renovation, the air felt almost sacred. On the far wall, I hung the silver microphone in a glass frame. The engraving gleamed softly under the sun filtering through the blinds. Borrowed once, belonged forever. It wasn't just decoration. It was an anchor, a relic of everything I had survived and refused to erase. The women came slowly at first, hesitant, shy, their voices tucked deep inside bruised lungs. Some had lost their speech to trauma, some to surgery, some to years of being told to keep it down. They arrived with their chests caved in, as if every breath was an apology. But sound is stubborn. It waits. One by one, they learned to find their tone again. There was Marla, who hadn't spoken above a whisper since her husband broke her jaw 10 years earlier. The first time she let out a full laugh, the whole class stopped to listen. It was like hearing sunlight through glass. There was Naomi, a trans woman recovering from throat reconstruction. She cried the first time she hit a note that felt like hers. "It's strange," she said. "I thought I had to sound like someone else to be real. Turns out, I just had to sound like me." I understood. Better than I ever wanted to. I didn't teach technique. I taught permission. We used mirrors, breathing exercises, and silence, long, intentional silence, because sometimes the absence of sound is the loudest form of truth. Every week, I recorded their progress, labeling the files with their chosen names. And every week, I listened back alone after class. No AI. No filters. No ghosts. Just the raw, trembling, irreplaceable texture of women relearning themselves. Each recording felt like a prayer Evelyn would have hated, because it was real. One afternoon after class, a young student stayed behind. She was maybe 19, with a scar along her neck that reminded me of mine. She glanced at the framed microphone and asked quietly, "Co-Celeste, are you ever afraid to hear your own voice again?" I smiled. The question had haunted me once. "No," I said, "because now, even if there are two people in me, only one of us sings the truth." The girl looked puzzled, then nodded slowly, as if she somehow understood that healing sometimes means keeping company with what once hurt you. Every month I hosted an open mic night, small, intimate, no cameras, no critics. We called it the Echo Evening. No one sang covers. Every woman performed a piece of her own letters, poems, confessions. No auto-tune, no music bed, just voice against air. The first time we did it, I didn't plan to speak. But as the night wound down, one of the women called out, "Celeste, what about yours?" The room fell silent. They waited. I walked to the center, under the dim amber lights. The silver microphone wasn't there, but the newer ones would do. I took a breath and said simply, "This is the sound of a woman who once mistook silence for peace." And then I began to hum. Soft, unsteady at first, then fuller, warmer. No lyrics. Just vibration. The kind that comes from somewhere below the ribs. The kind that says, "I survived." By the time I stopped, several of them were crying. I didn't expect applause, but they gave it anyway. Quiet, reverent, full of understanding. That night, I realized something I never had before. We don't sing to be heard. We sing to prove to ourselves we're still here. Sometimes, when the students left and the studio emptied, I would sit alone in the silence afterward. The glass case gleamed across the room. Under certain angles of light, the microphone's metal caught faint shadows of my reflection, overlapping with the ghost of Evelyn's engraved initials still faintly visible beneath the new words. It didn't scare me anymore. I'd stopped trying to erase her. You can't erase the person who taught you what not to become. Now, I spoke of her occasionally, not as a monster, not as a myth, but as a warning. She tried to own other people's voices, I would tell my students. Don't make that mistake. You can borrow power, but you can't keep it unless you share it. And they understood. 1 year after the broadcast, the local newspaper ran a small feature. From scandal to sanctuary, Celeste Morgan's studio helps women find their voices again. It wasn't front-page news. But that was the point. Freedom doesn't need an audience. The article ended with a quote from me that I barely remembered giving. The world is full of recordings. What we need are women brave enough to go off script. They called it poetic. I called it closure. That evening, I stayed late after class. The city outside hummed with faraway traffic, a lullaby of ordinary life. I opened the window, letting the air drift in, carrying faint sounds, sirens, laughter, the world continuing without permission. I liked that. On the desk lay the latest student recordings. I labeled each one carefully, reclaimed voice 27, 28, 29. When I reached the last file, I hesitated. For old time's sake, I whispered into the new microphone, half test, half ritual. Testing, 1, 2. The playback came instantly. No distortion, no doubling, no second voice hiding beneath. Just me. It felt like a small miracle. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I still sense Evelyn nearby, not haunting, just humming softly in some parallel rhythm. And I don't mind. Maybe that's what peace really is. Not erasing the ghosts, but learning to harmonize with them until they stop sounding like fear. I'll never know exactly where she ends and I begin. But maybe that boundary doesn't matter anymore. Maybe the song was always meant to be sung by two throats. One living, one remembered. When I locked up the studio that night, the lights caught the silver engraving one last time. Borrowed once. Belonged forever. I traced the letters with my fingertip, smiling. You see, Evelyn? I whispered. I didn't destroy you. I just changed the key. Outside, the wind carried faint echoes of laughter from down the street. Students leaving, still talking, still alive. The kind of noise that used to make me flinch. Now it sounded like a choir. The lights are softer this time. No press, no audience. Just one camera, a quiet room, and my reflection in the black lens, a circle of glass staring back like an unblinking eye. They tell me this is for the documentary's epilogue, that I can say whatever I want. For once, that feels like enough. I take a breath. The air moves gently through the scar at my throat. It still hums when I exhale. Not a wound anymore, just an instrument that remembers. I look straight into the lens and begin. If one day you hear someone else's voice speaking for you, don't stay silent. A pause. The words hang there, low and steady, the way truth always arrives. Without permission, but too late to stop. Maybe it's not possession. Maybe it's the part of your soul that's been waiting years to take the microphone back. I let that settle. Behind me, the wall of True Resonance Atelier glows faintly in the evening light. The silver microphone sits framed in glass, its engraving catching the glow. Borrowed once, belonged forever. It looks both like a memorial and a promise. I continue, voice softer now. I used to think freedom meant silence, not having to defend yourself anymore. But silence isn't peace. It's just the rehearsal room of fear. I shift slightly, folding my hands on the table. For years, I spoke with a voice that wasn't entirely mine. The law's, the media's, Evelyn's. I tried to cut her out, but that's not how survival works. You don't erase what hurt you. You outsing it. I smile. Not the kind for the camera, the small private one that feels like truth pressing gently at the corners of the mouth. There are people out there right now. Women, men, maybe you. Living with two voices inside them. One that begs to be believed, and one that whispers they don't deserve to speak. I lean forward slightly. Let the first one win. Just once. Say something out loud that no one has allowed you to before. It doesn't have to be brave. It just has to be yours. The cameraman doesn't move. Even he's forgotten to breathe. I glance back at the framed microphone one last time. Evelyn once told me that silence was treason. Maybe she was right. Just not in the way she meant it. I lift my eyes to the lens again, my reflection catching fire in the glass. So if you hear a story like mine, don't scroll past it. Share it. Because somewhere out there, someone's still living in a body that carries two voices and only one name. The cameraman gives the signal that we're nearly done. But I'm not ready yet. There's one thing left. The sentence that feels like both a confession and an answer. I breathe in, steady, let the hum rise through my throat like the start of a note. My story closes here. But maybe this is the first time I've truly heard myself, without anyone else in the room. I hold the gaze for 3 more seconds, long enough for the camera to feel human, long enough for whoever's watching to feel seen. Then I whisper the final line, barely above a breath, as if speaking into someone's ear instead of a lens. Don't let anyone dupe your truth. The red light on the camera blinks out. The room exhales. For a moment I sit there in the quiet, listening, not for ghosts, not for echoes, but for the simplest sound of all. My own breathing, steady and alive. Somewhere in that rhythm, a song begins again. Not hers, not mine, but ours. And this time, no one's recording.